What up, YouTube? It's your boy. I made a promise to a friend that I would do that. Anyway, it's been a hot minute. As a millennial that's definitely overworked right now, I'm not apologizing for it. But yeah, it has been a lot longer than I anticipated, both in actually having time to work on these aircraft kits and having the time to put the videos together. It's not only been busy for me, but it also looks like it's been busy for the FAA with regard to B-17s as well. Since we did the first video, there's actually a airworthiness directive that came out against the aircraft. It's pretty scary, actually. FAA is adopting a new airworthiness directive for all Boeing Model B-17E, F, and G airplanes. This AD was prompted by a report indicating that the left front spar lower fitting had completely separated at the wing to fuselage joint, and the equivalent joint on the right side of the airplane was cracked. This AD requires inspections of the wing terminal to spar cord joints and repair if necessary. The FAA is issuing this AD to address the unsafe condition on these products. So, yeah, I suppose we'll talk a little bit more about the B-17's wing structure when we do, when we actually get to the wings, because we're on the cockpit right now, and we'll get there. But the B-17s have two-piece wing spars. Well, there's a upper spar and a lower spar, essentially, connected by triangular cross bracing. And then they are each connected into the fuselage. And so this all came about from the B-17, I think it's a G model, that's owned by EAA, which is aluminum overcast. That was the aircraft that did actually fail the inspection during pre-flight. And it's worth noting that Yankee Lady has also been grounded as a result. And that one's owned by the Yankee Air Museum. And honestly, this may ground the entire B-17, or all of the B-17s that are still airworthy. Yeah, that's a major problem. Obviously, that's your main structural joint to the fuselage. Your landing loads, your flight loads, everything goes through that joint. So not a good thing to have fail. And so it looks like the remaining B-17s in flight, I think there's 4 left that are airworthy, are going to have some inspections to do. Reading further down, it looks like they're doing a magnetic particle inspection, which is you take some magnetic filings with a fluorescent liquid, and you magnetize the part, and if there's a crack, the filings will flow into that crack and stay there. And so when the rest of the fluid leaves the part, you'll have a fluorescing area where the crack is. Of course, you can only do that to metallic or not metallic, magnetic parts. So it doesn't work for the aluminum spar, but it does work for the end fitting. But they're doing an eddy current inspection, which just monitors the electrical current flow through a metallic alloy that helps you find cracks. So it'll be interesting to see what comes up with the remaining airworthy B-17s. Back to this video, however. So initially, my plan was to go ahead and do a comparison build of the cockpit area and as much of the internals as I could get through between the Revell kit and the HKM. And as I continued to build and also put this video together, I realized that video would be about 4 hours long. And as much as I could do that, A, nobody's going to watch it for 4 hours and listen to me drone on, and B, I don't know that I could talk for 4 hours about all of this. I'm sure I could try, but likely pretty unsuccessfully. Anyway, it's also a problem because the HKM kit has substantially more internal detail than the Revell kit does. Not just in the quality of the kit, but also how much of the internal features of the aircraft are modeled. The HKM kit, for example, has a full bomb bay. The Revell kit does not. The bomb bay doors on the Revell kit are actually sealed shut. They're molded shut into the fuselage halves. So if you wanted to do a bomb bay on a Revell B-17 1-48, you are going to be scratch building said bomb bay. You could 3D print one. You could build one out of styrene if you're rather creative. But yeah, suffice it to say that that detail's just not in the kit. We're going to do something a little special with the Revell 1-48 bomb bay. I'm not going to say what it is yet. We'll get there. But I do have plans for it. And they're pretty cool. Anyway, so back to the kits. So I did want to showcase that. It was going to get too long. So anyway, we're just going to do the Revell kit in this video. I'm going to have an episode 2.1 that comes out with the HKM. It should be a little bit shorter. But I'm also doing it in sequence of the instructions. So top left of your screen, you can see step 1 in the instructions is to build the bombardier's position, or most of the bombardier's position. There is some detail that gets added once you assemble it into the fuselage and once you're putting the glass dome on the front. But anyway, so I agonized over the bombardier's position for quite a while. And what I kind of discovered as I went through source material and looked for pictures of Memphis Belle and looked for pictures of other B-17 bombardier positions is that there's a lot of changes with them. A lot of them were changed in the fleet. I imagine that's likely because a lot of them suffered damage up there and had to be repaired, and different configurations were eventually made. So I tried to match Memphis Belle's as close as possible. So I did end up cutting off the post that supports the chair. One thing that was pretty common between all the aircraft in pictures that I looked at was all the chairs had, actual 4-leg or 4-chair legs. And so I went ahead and cut the post off, and you saw me make chair legs for that seat. All I did was really take a leftover sprue, use a lighter, heat it, and draw it out. And that gave me the material, and I could just bend it and make chair legs out of it. And they came out all right. And then I cut off one of the other features. I'm not even sure what it is, honestly, and I haven't been able to figure out what it is. But I cut it off and made the floor completely flat. There are some features I'm going to add. They're not shown in this video. I will show them later. And just a quick point out here, I was struggling with the micromask a little bit on this one. It did run down, so I did end up having to do a touch-up in what you're seeing on screen right now. But back to adding detail. So realistically speaking, the bombardier's position on this aircraft is probably the most visible internal feature. And so I want to showcase that a little bit. So as you saw in the image at the opening of the video, ammo belts that run from containers on the floor through to the 2 cheek guns. I'm going to pause real quick and point out on screen. I actually made a mistake here. So I used Tester's orange paint and was staining it with panel line wash from Tamiya. My mistake was that both of those paints are the same type of paint. I believe they're both enamels. Don't quote me on that. But either way, the crux of the story is that they're both the same type of paint. So when you would naturally apply thinner to thin the panel line wash, it doesn't really work too well because it thins the orange underneath it. So I realized this as I took a stroke to it, and it changed. And I'm like, okay, hold on, I gotta be a little bit more careful here. So I just carefully tried to mix it in a little bit, and it ultimately gave me the effect I wanted, that it looks a little bit like wood. Anyway, moving on. Where was I? Ammo belts. Yes. So I have some ammo belts that I bought aftermarket, and I essentially built up an ammo container. So I'm going to be running some of the ammo belts throughout the bombardier's position to the cheek guns. And interestingly enough, Memphis Belle has 2 guns that face forward directly out of the dome. And that was done on the F models because the cheek guns cannot fire fully forward. And so what they realized is that the B-17s can't protect their nose very well. particularly if an aircraft comes in a little high off the nose, because realistically the ball turret underneath is the only thing that can really shoot forward. There's a turret on top as well, but if you think about how many guns the B-17 can bring to bear to an aircraft that's at the side, right? You've got the gun turret on the top, you've got the ball turret on the bottom, you have the waist guns and the cheek guns that can all fire out to the side. And so you start to think of the math here of, well, if I have to attack a B-17, which way do I come from? Which way gives me the least coverage with weapons? And the answer to that is off the nose. So they did a mod to the B-17 where they installed a couple of 50 calibers sticking through the bombardier's glass straight forward. And Memphis Belle was one of those that had that mod. And ultimately this is what led to the design change to go to the G model, which has the chin turret. So yeah, suffice it to say, there's going to be quite a good amount of ammo belts going through the nose of an F model that has this modification, because essentially there's, I think it's 4, Browning 50 caliber machine guns sitting in that area of the aircraft, while also having to have the bombardier's aiming position with the Norden bomb sight and then the radio operator in the back. So it's pretty cramped up there already, and then you're going to start adding all these guns and the need to feed the guns. Anyway, back to the kit itself. The seat supports, which is what I'm painting here, they did have some injection molding visible. You can actually still see the point of injection, if you will, those little circular discs. So I went ahead and fixed the ones that were kind of wallowed into the material, but I left the ones that were sticking out. I thought honestly, it just looked a little bit more like a surface detail, and I was content to leave it like that. I did fix the other ones, just used a little bit of putty, and went from there. As pointed out on the screen, I agonized on the seat colors and the way the seats were built for quite a while. A lot of the images I found, the B-17 seats have like yellow cushions on them. I think they're cushions. I'm not sure if it's a parachute. Some more research is indeed needed. Maybe I'll throw that detail in episode 2.1 once I've done the necessary reading. But the cushions are molded into the seats on the Revell kit, and I painted it as best I could, and I didn't really like the way it came out. So I went and I did something different on the HKM kit, where I cut some styrene and basically made seat cushions. So I cut styrene, I used a little bit of modeling putty and just spread it on the surface. That way I could somewhat sand it to make it look non-uniform, so that it did look like a fabric. You'll see that process a little bit later in this video. And I then painted those yellow, painted the seats back to green, and sanded them a little bit until it would kind of match well with the profile from the styrene. And then I went ahead and glued it back together. It looked a lot better. You'll see it in a little bit. This video is 36 minutes long. I'm just going to grasp for things to look at. The floor area here, I think you had the option to really paint it with the green or like an anti-skid kind of material, anti-skid texture. I just went and stuck with green. So this is the point where I would say, if you're building a B-17 1-48, really think about how much detail you want in the cockpit, right? The cockpit is not very visible through the glass. The glass is, for the windshield for the aircraft is very small, and the viewing angles are very hard. And even if you can see inside, the light has a hard time getting in because of the way the structure is. And so to that end, I don't think I'd ever purchase a photo etch kit for cockpit detailing on a B-17, just from that alone. Which is unfortunate, because the B-17's cockpit's pretty cool. And so, it's just something to be aware of. I don't put too much stock in detailing the cockpit for this aircraft. As I've mentioned before, I have built the G model 1-48 before, and it's not very visible. The throttle quadrant that you see in between the two yokes there, it doesn't even have the throttles attached to it. which I can somewhat understand, right? They would be tiny. The B-17 throttles are actually pretty cool. They're, how do I describe this? They're long handles that come up, and then they've got two handholds that stick out perpendicular to the poles, and it essentially lets two people control the throttles at once. So if there's a flight engineer on board, or a pilot and a co-pilot can both do it. So yeah, that wasn't in this kit. Interestingly enough, it wasn't in the HKM kit either. But I don't have a problem with that. Again, you're not going to be able to see it. This piece is the forward bulkhead from the cockpit going down to the bombardier's position. The raised, what looks like it should be a door, is actually a door. Excuse me. It's worth noting that the cockpit floor in the B-17 has a cutout section between the two, between the pilot and co-pilot seats. That's how you get down to that access hatch to go into the bombardier's position. Obviously, the Revell kit didn't have that. The HKM does. You'll see that, again, as I said, in episode 2.1. And then you have this door through the forward bulkhead that actually lets you in and out of that area. So it's an open area to go down through the cockpit floor. Then you've got this door in the forward bulkhead, and that's how you get to the bombardier's position in the actual aircraft. This part, I was a little disappointed in. Not this part, but that forward bulkhead. There's a good amount of detail. There's a good amount of things on that bulkhead in the actual aircraft. And just having the flat panel kind of lets it down a little bit. I'll also point out, here you go. There's just no detail on that panel because you can't really see it. So I'm not worrying about it. But anyway, it's beside the point. So anyway, the back of that forward bulkhead, there's a good amount of stuff on that in the actual aircraft. And the HKM kit did a much better job at molding it than the Revell kit did, which, is roughly to be expected. So with this piece, I'm going to be adding a good amount of detail to it before I put it in the airplane. I will showcase that in another video. I'm not going to do it right now. What I am going to do is cut out the door, though, because I want that to be visible from the nose cone of the aircraft, or the glass of the aircraft on the front. But there's things like, there's next to that bulkhead, there's an oxygen bottle that needs to be added. There's also electrical conduits and wiring that needs to be added. I think it's only electrical. I don't think there's any hydraulics that run through there. But they're all tucked kind of under that angled surface at the top of it as it leads down into the flat of the bulkhead. So basically where the instrument panel would be. And so there's a bunch of electrical wiring, electrical conduit there. That's good surface detail. I believe there's some electronics on that panel as well. It wouldn't surprise me to know that there's circuit breakers there for the radio. I don't know that. Again, I'm just speculating here what these things are before I do the research to figure out what they are and then try to model them. And so, there's a good amount I can add there because it's visible from the bombardier's position. It really needs some detail, like in dire need of some detail. So I'll be modeling something in there once I've done a little bit more research as to what's actually on that panel and how I can make it, right? So I could 3D print it. That's an option. I could just hand build it out of materials that I have lying around. I've got sprues so I can make round things like oxygen canisters. I've got styrene so I can make flat things. And things like that. Electrical wire, I honestly just used electrical wire. Like I get a piece of wire and I go ahead and pull out the strands of that, and that's my, scale wire. As you can see, this is the point where I changed my mind and painted the seats back green. I'm not going to do a super job of painting these because I'm going to cover them up. I just want to cover up the yellow. Speaking of yellow, actually, while we're on the subject, yellow is a painful color to paint, particularly in a hand brushing situation. I have not really found a good way to do it because it doesn't coat evenly. It's a very annoying color. It's like painting white, which can be done, but it's much better sprayed out of an airbrush, to be honest. You get a much more even color. You don't have show through on it. So at the point where I did the oxygen bottles, I tried doing that hand brushing, and I ended up like 5 or 6 coats deep, and it still just was showing through. And so finally I just was like, okay, whatever. And I touched it up with a little bit of non-thinned yellow, and that helped correct a little bit. And since I was panel line washing it anyway, it actually came out looking all right. But we'll get there. I'm getting ahead of myself again. Seems to be what I do. But anyway, so here you can see I'm using just regular super glue. I'm going to install the cushions for the seats. They're very small, very finicky. I did dry fit them before I went ahead and glued them in place, so I did know that they were going to fit. And then from there, let's see, what do we do? Yellow, bombardier's position, detail on the front bulkhead. Yeah. Some of the ones that are more attentive may have also discovered in the kit something that makes it so that I have a little bit more light in the enclosed areas. From that perspective, you can imagine my desire to detail the kit is going to be a touch higher. Anyway, so speaking to a difference between the HKM and the Revell kit here, the Revell kit, when you install this into the aircraft or into the fuselage, this is pretty much it. As you see it, like that's what gets installed, which I thought was a little bit annoying. The kit also didn't come with seatbelts, which I'm manufacturing here. I had some very, very fine grit sandpaper that looked about the right color, so I just made it out of that, super glued it onto the seats. But anyway, back to the point I'm making. The kit doesn't come with any of the side paneling detail for the cockpit, right? So the B-17, to point out and make a point of it, is that the B-17 is not a pressurized aircraft, but it's required to fly at high altitude for its own survival. Okay, humans are pretty fragile, so we like to have a good pressurized supply of air if we're above about 10,000 feet, right? 10,000 feet is about as high as you can go, especially if you're not trained for it, right? I mean, there's the people that can climb Everest without supplemental oxygen and things like that, but they've trained for that. Pilots are going up and down all the time. They're not necessarily trained in the same athleticism for breathing as those mountain climbers are. So the requirement for these aircraft is that they had to be able to supply pressurized oxygen to the crew, and that's all of them. Interesting, my computer just went to sleep mid-record. I hope that didn't affect it at all. Doesn't look to have. Okay. So, back on track here. Where's the train tracks? I'm going to find them. Anyway, so pressurized oxygen. So yeah, the aircraft's required to carry pressurized oxygen for each of the positions in the aircraft. There's a good amount of oxygen canisters in the cockpit for these aircraft, like a solid good amount, because you've got a pilot, the co-pilot, and potentially a flight engineer sitting up there, the crew passing through there as well, and then anybody that you don't have space to supply with oxygen tanks throughout the rest of the aircraft that are in the nose should probably have some supplemental there. And you also need enough to go do a long duration mission such as flying from the UK to Berlin and back, right? And have enough to spare. And so that's kind of the point where it's like, okay, not only do I have these oxygen bottles, I have a lot of these oxygen bottles in the cockpit. So what I did was, and I'm starting it here, I used the HKM kit as a little bit of a template, and I manufactured the side panels for the cockpit. So here I am desperately struggling to cut through the styrene to get these out. I tried to shape them similar to the HKM, but in such a way that they'll fit the Revell kit just fine. And I think ultimately I was pretty successful at that. And then I mimicked the surface details from the HKM. So here you can see me test fitting. It doesn't quite fit between the aft bulkhead and the panel. So a little bit of work, custom work. If I get it wrong, I just start again. It's not that big of a deal. You could, in theory, 3D print these relatively easily. Take some hand measurements before, but I opted not to. I want to do a little bit more organic. And my 3D printer is a little busy with something that I will show you soon. It's a little tantalizing because it's sitting on my desk looking at me, and I was wanting to do the video on it between the MiG and the B-17. But 3D printing is an interesting phenomenon that it takes a good amount of time to model whatever you're doing, a little bit of time to set it up on the printer, and then a long time to print it, depending on the size. And let me tell you, this one took a long time to print. Anyway, back to our beloved Flying Fortress. Yeah, there you can see the HCAM kit actually briefly. So the side panels, I got them to the point that they roughly fit. I did end up trimming them down just a little bit. Yeah, there you go. Alluded to that a little bit earlier. So I did end up trimming down the side panels just a touch because it was putting a little bit of flex on the aft bulkhead. But yeah, they fit just fine. And so here, I'm not going crazy on the surface detail, right? As I said, you can't really see it from the external part of the aircraft kit once it's built. But that doesn't mean I don't want anything in the cockpit. And so this was like a little experiment for me, right? How good are we at manufacturing some of this stuff? So between the 3D printer's job lists, I did print replacement oxygen bottles. Didn't film that one, considered it, but ultimately I think I was at the point where I was just kind of tired. I've been filming some other stuff on the 3D printer, didn't want to set it all up again. And realistically speaking, I'm starting to run out of hard drive space, as funny as that is. And so I went ahead and manufactured some of these parts just to give a little bit more detail as you're looking in the sides of the cockpit, because you can actually see that. From the front, you can see the top of the panel, you can see the seats, and you can't really see the aft bulkhead very much, mostly because the seats are obscuring your view. From the sides, you can actually see the side panels. And since you've noticed that at this point, and I've pointed out to you a couple times, there are actually LEDs in the floor of this kit, you're going to be able to see a good amount more once I get that set up. And so part of that is I need to add a little bit more detail into that cockpit to make it a little bit more pleasing to look at. So that's what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm going to mimic it as best as possible. I'm not going to copy all the surface features because realistically speaking, you can do a lot with paint. It doesn't always have to be three-dimensional, particularly not when you're looking at it through a window already. So I used styrene. I used a little bit of like those manila folders you get for organizing things. I actually used, that's what this is. It comes in about the right thickness. Once I paint it, it's all sealed up. It's not going to degrade. It worked. It really is what it comes down to is it worked. It was easy to cut. It was easy to shape. So that's what I did. Anyway, okay, we're just getting to the video where it's starting to get a little difficult to talk about some of this stuff because the progression of what I'm doing on screen is quite a bit slower than the progression of what I want to talk about. But that's okay. So yeah, for this, just copying and pasting basically and making some detail. Talking about where we go from here. So again, this is all off instructions. So, about half of this video has been steps that actually have instructions for them, and about half of this video so far has not. And I don't expect the rest of the kit will continue to follow that trend. There is a good amount of customization I'm doing to the fuselage and the wings. We'll get there. Essentially, I'm rescribing it and continuing to wage war against the raised panel line, battle war that I've been having. Realistically speaking, I think I just need to build better kits, which the HKM is definitely a better kit, so it's nice and rewarding. And I'm also trying to just purge myself of the Revell models that I have in the stash. Just get them built and get them out of the way, particularly since they are a little bit simpler. So we'll continue to do that. The ammunition belts, I kind of talked about that already. Those are all basically custom. So that one's off instruction. I'll kind of detail that a little bit better as well. Interestingly enough, I've found Alclad, the company that makes the metal-infused paints that do a really good job with aluminum and chrome finishes. They don't make a brass, at least not that I've found, which may just be a problem between my desk and the back of my seat. So I'll keep hunting that, but I haven't found any. I did get some copper, so I could potentially mix some aluminum and some copper and get more of a brassy color to it. Stand by for an answer on that, because I will be sure to talk about it when the time comes. Here you can see me using a little bit of safety wire as whatever that is. I think that's probably an oxygen line, to be honest, with a regulator attached. Again, I don't know. I didn't do a whole lot of research into it. I just kind of mimicked what the HKM kit had because it looked good. And finding pictures from inside Memphis Belle is not necessarily challenging, but there's not exactly a ton out there, right? 99.9% of the pictures taken and tagged as Memphis Belle are of the external side by visitors that can't get inside the aircraft. But anyway, we're getting off topic again. So we got the surface detail to restore in the Revell kit. The Revell kit is going to have an interesting mounting setup. So that's going to have to get some details added to it. And there are some other electronic goodies going into the Revell kit that I will also detail. So yeah, here you can see I'm doing the oxygen bottles. I just 3D printed them. I didn't take a ton of time to get them perfect, but again, they look okay. I'm perfectly happy with it as they came out. I wasn't trying to go overboard here. But so there's more electrical goodies to go into the aircraft, and that'll all be detailed. The rest of it essentially will be just built from the kit. There's not as many pieces in those kits, but I think from what's left after I add the surface detail to the parts, it'll kind of come out of its shell a little and show you how good it is. I am kind of interested in how the wing attach is going to go. I remember that being a little problematic on the G model I built, which is 909. I can't remember if I put a picture in it in the last video. I think I did. If not, I will put a picture of it in the next video. Which I just about have ready, by the way. I'm just editing it because I did build the two kits together, and then as I got to the 30-minute mark on this video, I'm like, you know what? I haven't even put any footage of the HKM kit in here yet. Really, I should, go ahead and wait and just do a separate part. I think I'll also, throughout the B-17, I may also experiment with talking a little bit less. Because here, there's not much to talk about, right? I wanted this to be a guide to be helpful, but all I can really say is I'm just roughly painting buttons where buttons should go. And again, I'm roughly painting them. From the inside of the cockpit looking in to that area, you can't see a whole lot of that, so it actually looks pretty decent, surprisingly enough. Anyway, if you made it this far, I would casually remind you, go ahead and subscribe if you would like. I promise my camera works usually a little bit better. I have something going on with my camera this time, which is why it's a little bit grainy. I went on a little vacation in the middle of this, and I changed all my camera settings. And when I changed them back, I think I just had the wrong setting selected. So I believe at this point of the kit I've corrected it, but early in the video, or this point of the video, I've corrected it. Earlier in the video, you may have noticed the grain. So yeah. Here, I realized I painted that the wrong color. I wanted that to be green. I thought it'd be a good time to show me mixing paint, particularly because I used to do it on spoons, and then I found these little plastic cups, and that was a lot better. I was a little embarrassed to put the spoons on the video. But anyway, so like the HKM kit, we're just going to mimic how those oxygen bottles are installed and go from there. I will say the aft bulkhead of the B-17 actually has a circuit breaker panel, and I realized after I put these on, which I wasn't going to make a circuit breaker panel for this aircraft anyway, but once these are kind of put in place, there's actually not enough room to make one. So if you were looking to do to that level of detail and you're watching this, I'd move the left-hand side, so it's on the right-hand side of your screen here. I would move the oxygen bottles forward just a little bit, and that way you get enough space to put in the circuit breaker panel. I wasn't going to go to that much detail, so I didn't really worry about it. Here we're going to have a little bit easier time with the panel line wash because this is back to Tamiya paints, so the thinner only thins the wash. But yeah, we're getting to the end here for this part. So thank you everybody that stuck around. I know this was a long-winded one. I'm pretty winded, so I'm pretty glad this is just about wrapped up. I'm not going to glue these panels in place yet because I need to figure out the best fit into the aircraft. But yeah, if you're still around, like, subscribe, leave a comment, ask questions. I am happy to help wherever I can. And yeah, there you can see essentially the finished product. So thank you everyone. Catch you later.